I'm Tom Billington, the CEO of Billington Cybersecurity. Welcome to this virtual roundtable inside the DoD Zero Trust Strategy. It will feature a fireside chat with Randy Resnick, the Director for the Zero Trust Portfolio Management Office within the Office of the DoD CIO. Mr. Resnick was at the NSA for over 34 years. There, he successfully executed and led numerous zero trust activities across the agency. Interviewing him will be Steve Faehl, the security CTO at Microsoft Federal. Steve is the federal security business leader driving Microsoft's efforts to help the US government accelerate security modernization. Both Steve and Randy will be online during this webinar to answer your questions. We welcome you here and look forward to your feedback. Steve, it's all yours.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Randy, for speaking with us today. I want to start with the exciting news coming out of your office, the release of DoD's Strategic Zero Trust Plan. Can you give us a bit of a high-level view of what it's trying to achieve and why this strategy is so important to DoD?
Steve, the strategy which just came out, it was published at the end of November. It was signed out at the end of October. Is really a exciting milestone for the Department of Defense. We have been working on zero trust and its principles within the DoD for the last 4 years. Not a lot of people are aware of that. It started off really as a very small project, and it led up to where it is today. So the publication of the strategy really is a culmination of 4 years of full-time effort across dozens and dozens of incredibly smart people across multiple agencies, namely NSA, DISA, Cyber Command, and folks from DoD CIO and other places, the services as well. So this is not just a portfolio office delivery. It really is a successful delivery of everybody that has had a touch in zero trust over the last 4 years. So from a personal and professional point of view, it's very satisfying to see that the strategy was published. It really is a huge sea change. I would call it a step function in thinking about cybersecurity in the Department of Defense, because it finally put to bed the idea that perimeter defense actually was a workable solution for cybersecurity in the DoD. As much as we invested dollars and talent into implementing perimeter security, it just didn't seem to keep up with the tactics, techniques, and procedures of our adversaries. And so by putting out this zero trust strategy, it really hits home that this is not enough, and we need more capability for cybersecurity, and namely that zero trust. And also, it really is another acknowledgement in the DoD that the adversary is in our network. Whether or not we know that or not, we are assuming they are. And so this is a really big deal to actually put to paper to say, assume the adversary is already in your network. If you really think you're protected, just assume they're already there. And that's your start point for deciding how to protect your data. So the publication of the strategy recently really hits home that fact as well.
I love that Mr. Sherman calls that out explicitly within the strategy right at the top.
I believe within the first line.
Yeah, absolutely. Brings great focus and an understanding of the mission at hand. So within your strategy, it really has 3 primary options to achieve zero trust, at least at the target level by FY27. Right. Can you explain each of those courses of action for us?
Yeah, so let me start off by explaining the concepts of target and advanced, and I'll also explain the courses of action. Our objective in the DoD, as I began earlier when I was talking about it, is to stop the adversary from exploiting our data. So in order to do that, our North Star was to stop, contain, frustrate, limit lateral movement of the adversary. So that's our success point. And we work backwards from there. And so we determined that in order to achieve that, we had to do a number of uh, activities and capabilities in the network and on the IT infrastructure and at the endpoints and everywhere in between implemented in order to create that effect from the adversary's perspective. And so that entire formula across all 7 pillars of zero trust, we're calling target. It's a very meaningful term in the DoD. It's self-explanatory. You're either at target or you're sub-target, so it really makes sense to a lot of people. And so the target level zero trust is the goalpost to which we are saying the DoD has to hit in 5 years or less. The way to do that is through what we believe are 3 courses of action. Course of action number 1 is to modernize the existing networks that are on the ground. We're calling this a brownfield approach since we're augmenting what is already existing into elements that lay down zero trust in order to deliver the outcomes that we are seeking to stop, slow down, contain, frustrate the adversary. So that would be COA 1, and that would likely take a few years to do, as many as 5 years, and that's why we have the 5-year plan. Because you have to do this across a global basis, across 3 million endpoints. You have to do it right. You have to red team and purple team them. It's not so easy, but it could be done, and we lay out how to do that. Course of action number 2 is to think about doing zero trust in the cloud. So we made our COA 2 zero trust in commercial clouds. So when we looked around in the DoD and we said, okay, what commercial clouds exist? We saw that there were 4 CSPs or cloud service providers that were delivering services in the future under the JWCC contract. And so we said to ourselves, why don't we approach those 4 contractors independent of JWCC, but to bring up the subject of zero trust with them, show them what our definition of zero trust is, meaning zero trust to the target level, minimally, and ask them whether or not they believe they could do zero trust to the target level within their cloud infrastructures. And we got 4 different answers because every infrastructure is made up of different capabilities in each one of those companies. To our satisfaction, at least on paper, they said to us that all of them could meet target level zero trust, and that many of them could approach almost the entirety, if not the entirety, of full zero trust, which we're calling advanced. In the strategy, target level zero trust is to fulfill and deliver 91 activities. And for advanced, it's an additional 61 on top of that for a total of 152 activities. So this is no small feat of some of these cloud vendors to say that they could do that. What we plan on doing is actually testing their assertions. And so this year, in the spring and summer, perhaps fall, depending on whether or not we have to go back to our round 2, we're intending on testing all 4 of those CSPs this year with their zero trust overlays for what they believe they're telling us they could do at the target level. And we're going to have the NSA red team and perhaps even service red teams attack that. And so that would be a realistic adversary attack, controlled attack, and we would determine whether or not the red teams could get in and exploit data. That's going to give us a really good feel on whether or not the zero trust overlays are implemented correctly in any 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those CSPs, and that'll give us a way forward for recommending to the DoD whether or not we could do zero trust in the cloud. If we speed ahead and we come to the conclusion that in fact it can be done, it would be absolutely revolutionary, because this means now that we can basically spin up a zero trust cloud in a future DoD instantiation, and it would already be built in with Zero Trust as part of its foundation. You would still have to write the rules, the policies, the user end of things. But the hard work of putting it all together and integrating all those capabilities that we're talking about in the strategy would already be pretty much pre-done for you. And that is a dramatic change in implementing Zero Trust. It reduces risk, it reduces cost, it greatly simplifies moving to Zero Trust for the department. And so that is a really important step for us to try to prove this fiscal year. And then the last thing is the course of action number 3, which is doing Zero Trust in a private cloud. So what we mean by a private cloud is a cloud that is designed by the government, built by the government, run by the government, defended by the government. There's no element of commercial in the infrastructure of the private cloud. So we have a number of private clouds in the DoD right now. It used to be called Milnet. Right now it's called Stratus. I could just rattle them all off. But there's plenty of private clouds that we currently have right now that aren't commercial clouds in the sense that they're commercially run and on-prem, but on DoD property. But these are true private clouds that the government is running. And so that's what we mean by that. There's an example of a private cloud that actually reaches the advanced level of Zero Trust. NSA built and designed it, and it's right now sitting in Dreamport, which is U.S. Cyber Command's innovation facility in Columbia, Maryland. NSA has built that, has been operating that and developing that for the last 18 months, perhaps 2 years. It seems successful at the advanced level. And our intention, the portfolio office's intention, is to also red team that private cloud. They call it the NZTC, Native Zero Trust Cloud. We intend on red teaming that as well in this fiscal year. So we'll be red teaming COA 2 solutions potentially and COA 3 solutions potentially this year. So this is a big year for us.
That's amazing. So I think, as I listen to this, it sounds like with 3 courses of action, a good amount of flexibility has been built in. So there's guidance on what target is, advanced, that definition doesn't change. But in terms of how it's achieved, great flexibility for the services in that aspect.
Right. And let me just add, because I didn't mention it, but it's important, is that we're not mandating that the services pick only one. We're expecting that the services are going to have any combination of COAs 1, 2, and 3, because they're going to have to look at each one of their networks, big and small, all their endpoints, and they're going to have to decide which ones lend itself to moving to a commercial Zero Trust solution. Let's say it's an option. Which ones really should be private cloud based, and which ones remain for potentially a COA 1. Things like that might be mission and capability apps that can't be moved into a cloud environment. Well, those have to be a COA 1 solution because they have to be operated on-prem, not cloud. So we're giving them the maximum flexible option, and we describe in the strategy and the implementation plan the outcomes that we're looking to achieve.
I'll also mention, use the word revolutionary. And so in conversations on Zero Trust, there are 3 complaints generally that I hear. One of them is it's not proven. The second one is it's not measurable. And then the third is it's really hard. And so in terms of revolutionary, what you're talking about is do something that's proven, make it measurable, and make it easier. So I really do think, achieving those objectives is a revolutionary goal.
Right, and we shouldn't be afraid of trying. There's a lot of innovation that's happened in the DoD, if not the country, over the last decades. You have to try these things. Everything about Zero Trust, when you really look at the nuts and bolts of it, have already been proven technologies from a information system security perspective. What the genius of Zero Trust really is the integration of all of them together, which is something that only technology has been able to deliver recently and hasn't been able to deliver as early as 10 years ago. So I personally don't see it as a high risk. Others may, and that's only because it hasn't been integrated together. But when I look at it, I see this as relatively low risk, tremendous return on its investment if we are successful. And so it's worth doing. And we'll know soon enough whether or not it's achievable or not. I'm highly confident it is. We've seen examples of it in the banking industry where it is successful. Google has had success internally into their infrastructure. There are other examples. So I don't think I don't personally believe it's a high risk.
Well, we talked about the technology being ready. Let's talk a little bit about the people aspect of the strategy and the people being ready. Why is changing the DoD's security culture so important in moving the entire department as a single enterprise to a zero trust framework?
So as I said earlier, acknowledging that perimeter defense is not solving the problem for cybersecurity, it really comes down to a non-IT challenge area for zero trust. For example, policies may have to be changed, procedures may have to be changed, training may have to be upskilled in a number of people. Security awareness may have to be improved. So there's a whole constellation of supporting effort that has to go on to implement zero trust. And so, you know, it's a culture change that's required. I don't want to minimize it, but it's really a small c when it comes to the culture. This is not yesterday's cybersecurity. People shouldn't dismiss it. I could tell you anybody that's getting into zero trust, there's a learning curve because you've been so trained on the ways of doing cybersecurity in the past that while zero trust is complementary to it, it is still different. There's a different vocabulary that has to be learned. There's a good 3-month or more learning curve. It's just based on my own personal experience and the experience of folks who I hire or that I see working in zero trust new from, let's say, the components or in industry. You know, it's a forever learning science, just like cybersecurity ought to be anyway.
The plan really also pays a lot of attention to implementation. So is the culture piece covered throughout, really a cornerstone. But I think what's differentiated is so much attention paid on implementation, which to date has not been common in zero trust plans. So can you tell us a little bit about the thinking that went into putting this implementation plan together? You mentioned working on it for over 4 years, full-time, tremendous effort coming to bear on this. Are there some key milestones that you'll be looking for in evaluating that implementation and how they're coming along?
Yep. So when the team, you know, we settled on what you see in the strategy, but it really was a back and forth that went on for quite a few months in early 2022, probably across 20 or 25 very seasoned professionals on our team. And that was deciding what should and shouldn't be accomplished in order to achieve zero trust. Again, the North Star had to be to stop the adversary. So what was different in our strategy, if you notice, is that we're not describing solutions. We're describing what needs to be accomplished, not the how. So from the get-go, it was important for us from an implementation point of view to allow the components, the services, the co-coms, others, to have maximum flexibility on to choose what vendor solutions or what COAs they wanted to go on without us in the portfolio office dictating any of that. Simple reason, we don't have visibility into that entire infrastructure. We don't know down to the nth degree at the final endpoint exactly what the requirements are that the components have. So it's best for them to decide. As long as we describe to them the outcomes, again, this is outcomes-based strategy, which in and of itself might be very unique and different than the way strategies have been implemented before. You know, instead of box checking or, you know, making sure certain controls are met, this is outcomes-based that's going to be proven by red teams and constantly proven by red teams over time. We're talking about laying down solutions that are customized as long as they hit the target level and the advanced level. In terms of the level of specificity, they have to prove to us that they're achieving not only the outcomes, but that their own internal red teams or testing or IATO documents are fulfilling the requirements that we've asked for. Also, the start points for the components are all different. We have a sense of where the maturity is on what's laid down or what is already invested in the services, but we don't have conclusive understanding at the expert level as to where those start points are. And so we're loosely tracking progress. We know what we need to see. We know we have a 5-year plan. We don't quite yet know what codes they're going to choose, but worst case, it's going to be a COA 1. So roughly speaking, we could assume they're going to need to accomplish a minimum of 20% every year. That's just rough estimate. And so we'll generally know and can compare progress loosely based on a certain percentage a year that we believe they should be chugging through. We're going to be intimately involved with everybody. We already have a high bandwidth communication with the components, but certainly quarterly, we're going to be getting reports from them as to what the remaining POAMs are to achieve full zero trust at the target level. And so we're going to see in short order what remains. And we'll be a high bandwidth communicating with every one of them and tracking. If somebody falls behind, it's a sort of carrot and stick. DoD CIO does have the power to pause funding. It's not a threat, but if we see that a component is significantly behind and there's like a intractable problem that's not being solved, then when we enter into the annual budget process, that'll be the place where the DoD CIO could voice frustration, concern, and we can get remediation at that point. So there's many ways to track progress in its implementation, but I don't feel it's going to get to that point. Everybody has a tremendous commitment to wanting to do zero trust. It has been frictionless. I've never seen buy-in to the extent of the buy-in I'm seeing, and I came from NSA. There's always folks outside of your agency that wants to fight change. Zero trust is a case where this is not happening. It's astounding to me, but this is true. So in a way, I have the easiest job possible because it's very little that I need to do to convince somebody that this is required. And so everybody is very much motivated, wanting to do it, and we're making sure the funding is there to make all of that happen.
It's great to hear that DoD is already moving out as a single enterprise on this initiative. Let's double click a little bit on that high bandwidth communication that you mentioned. Your portfolio management office has been driving this plan, but the implementation will be a team effort across the enterprise. Who are some of the key players in making this happen? And what does that high bandwidth communication look like to ensure success?
Yep. So we have weekly huddles between us and our key stakeholders where they're keeping track of us and we're keeping track of them on a weekly basis. That happens every Monday morning for an hour. Then we have our community of interest on ZT, where it's more of an education learning process. We probably have 200 people on our Zero Trust COI, and they range from everybody across the components, even folks from outside DoD sign in. And then on a quarterly basis, we hold and have Zero Trust TEMS, technology sessions, where we really deep dive into the science of Zero Trust, how we're implementing, perhaps which integrations are working for folks, which ones have challenges. And so this is where the technical people really learn from each other. In addition to that, there are agencies that are contributing, like I said earlier at the beginning. We have DISA, which is doing important work on the transport infrastructure, as well as other programs and projects that they're delivering. First and foremost is in the ICAM enterprise service. We have JFHQ DoD has to protect this network, so we're talking and reaching out to them to understand what their challenges are, what their analytic engines are today, what they would like to have tomorrow, how they would like to be 5 years from now in terms of their operations. NSA in terms of next generation cybersecurity for zero trust, increasing their capabilities to support the DoD in terms of their movement to zero trust, as well as them performing certain missions that I believe they are second to none on, and that's the purple teaming, the evaluations, the red teaming. They're based on the background of the folks and the offense defense knowledge, they're second to none there. And of course, cybercom, which is extremely important for protection of the DoD and peace. There are the components, that we engage with. There's a lot of outreach. We have, things that people wouldn't necessarily think about, but we need to, and that's the acquisition community on how we're going to acquire these hardware and software, and to do it in a time frame that's quick. I can't wait. Components can't wait a year or 14 months or 16 months to receive equipment when we have a 5-year deadline. That doesn't scale. So we're talking with them about changing the way we procure and receive zero trust hardware, software, and services. We have R&D. We have important elements, projects inside the building which depend on zero trust. Such as JADC2 and the CDAO office, which is, with the former Jake, but also working in the AI realm, but also working with the data standards for tagging and labeling, which is so important for zero trust. So you could see that we have our fingers and interests in a lot of places. Every one of them is fully depending on the Zero Trust Portfolio Office to deliver for them, to deliver expertise for them, to deliver product and capability for them. We're depending on others for all of that. And so it's become a very tight ecosystem, very important to drive zero trust. And I just dropped the seed. We could talk about it perhaps later. And that is that the FedCiv community, the Office of the National Cyber Director, OMB, CISA, we've reached out to them, they've reached out to us, and there's a lot of interest there in sharing information, sharing our approach, and seeing whether or not there's something that we have that could help them accelerate the FedCiv zero trust maturity to lay down, some of that goodness on government systems is, quicker than they originally anticipated.
That's fantastic. We'll definitely get back to that one. I think that's a great topic to dig into a bit more. You mentioned earlier the 4 CSPs that you worked with. Microsoft was honored to be one of those CSPs to provide our industry perspective on zero trust. It's been great collaborating with your office. And we appreciate your leadership here. As a question, though, as we look at proving out COA 2, there's planned testing, work with these CSPs lined up. But how should the broader private sector look into fitting into DoD's zero trust implementation plans?
So we're really very dependent on industry, and I'll say it for the following reasons. We need industry's help in so many ways. Firstly, it's about scale. We're not going to be able to, especially in COA 1, I believe, lay down zero trust infrastructure at a quick enough pace and on a global basis when we have other mission to conduct in the Department of Defense. It's going to be difficult without industry participation and help, integrators, whatever it might be, to aid those components in accelerating their adoption of zero trust, whatever it might be. Also, the development of future products and services. We need a continued acceleration of solutions that are out there that are increasingly interoperable with each other, increasingly merged in a sense that two or more vendor products work together seamlessly. Um, we need industry and integrators to help in general with the COA 2 option. So I'm imagining that the CSPs are going to have to help out a lot in terms of sharing with the DoD. It's one thing to lay down zero trust inside the cloud if we could prove that out and make it happen. But then it's another thing to provide the documentation to make it simple for the services and the component, and the COCOMs and others and agencies to actually do this on a repeated basis. I don't know what that might look like. It might be something that they procure as a service, but it would be nice if industry and the CSPs were helping out to make sure that these implementations are done securely, correctly, according to how that cloud operates, understanding the intent of the component in terms of what they're trying to do with zero trust, and to have the cleared personnel, depending on where the network is for that solution, at the ready. And the list probably goes on, but industry is extremely important. And then when it comes to potentially other areas like in the TS world, that's where we would have to move to zero trust solutions in the Intel community. And that too is where industry could help out, but at a higher level. But right now we're focused on the NIPRNet and the SIPRNet.
So right now, what you're focused on, execution of the zero trust plan. You have next steps in that you're looking at some pilots, looking at CSPs to sort of bring together that critical mass to achieve target, looking at the rest of industry to rally for COA 1,
Yep.
and really SIs to support across the board. It seems like great plan. You have great momentum. Are there a couple of things that are needed that maybe you don't currently have in the playbook? Either they didn't make the cut yet, or you're starting to look to what's next. Is there anything else that's needed in order to move the needle for this strategy?
Yeah, yes, there is. As part of being the accelerator for zero trust in the Department of Defense, we took it very seriously that we're plowing new ground here. And we're moving out as if nothing is stopping us. So there is no documentation on zero trust that's out there. When we started off last, let's say February 22, 11 months ago, it'll be almost 12 months at the end of January, early February. Nothing really existed in industry and publicized on how to build out a zero trust network. The idea of zero trust, the theory of zero trust was there, but when we went to look and try to find how to build it out, it didn't exist. So we had to figure all that out for ourselves, and that led to the publication of the strategy and the implementation plan. But that's not everything the DoD requires to implement zero trust. I'll give you an example. We work on the idea of interim approval to operate. So we require, due to the nature of just what it is for security, NIST 800-53 controls. So here we have now a future with zero trust, and we don't know what controls to measure it against. And so we recognize that in the portfolio office, and we are going to be delivering more and more capability that's going to be published at an unclassified level. Again, it'll eventually be on the DoD CIO library website, where we're going to be continuing publication of documentation to further enhance the ability of the DoD to move and accelerate to zero trust. So not only are we doing everything that you just mentioned in this fiscal year, but we fully plan on also publicizing and publishing a NIST 800-53 ZT overlay that we're going to drive into the CNSS as an eventual standard, but we'll make that We'll go through the agreement process. We call it CADMs in the DoD to get approval of that, and eventually we'll work with the right standards body organizations and NIST to actually make that an official overlay. So we'll know once and for all what are the controls that are required for zero trust, which is another way of describing the activities and the capabilities that are required as an outcome. We're also going to be working on probably a version 1.5 of the Zero Trust implementation plan. And the reason for that is there's been, since the day we published, and even before the publishing of the Zero Trust strategy, there was and still is a great debate on whether or not you could do Zero Trust in a disconnected or very low bandwidth environment. At the far endpoint, the last mile. And that's a great question because every service has a different tactical environment challenge, at different levels. And so how to do zero trust at the tactical level is a question. And when you look at the strategy and the implementation plan, it's really written in an almost perfect world where it's an enterprise level environment. We're talking about places that are air conditioned, and we assume high bandwidth. So this is a key question for the services, and they were absolutely right, and we did not address it. And so this 0.5 would be essentially a addendum that we would want to put on to the existing strategy or implementation plan, or both. We'll call it 1.5, or if need be, we'll call it a 2.0. But the next iteration will include both the tactical environment zero trust requirements, as well as what we have right now, plus any changes that folks are communicating with us that need to happen at the enterprise level for zero trust. There's also a reference architecture. We have the zero trust reference architecture version 2.0, the general one, which is already out there. We plan on doing this year a publication of zero trust in 5G, essentially 5G zero trust. There's a lot of interest in the 5G world on how zero trust impacts that. And depending on your viewpoint, you could look at 5G as transport, or 5G as infrastructure, or 5G as an end-to-end capability. And so that's why we're coming out with let's think through zero trust in a 5G world. I mentioned some pilots in the DDIL environment. And last thing we're working on, because we actually did the work, but we never really packaged it. And that is if we could do, package the DoD CAR assessment for the zero trust implementation plan. There's folks that are very interested in understanding how we took the current threat environment into play when we devised the steps or the activities for zero trust. And there is a connection. It's not well understood. It's not clear when I or others brief it, but there is a high correlation between what you see in terms of the activities that we're asking for target and the reasons behind it based on threat. And so publishing the way we thought through it through the DoD CAR assessment model and the procedures for that, we also intend on doing that this fiscal year. So there's a lot that's going to continue. As folks talk to us about what documentation is required in the DoD, we'll take it seriously and we'll work on it, and we'll publish those things too. And because we're plowing new ground, all this is dual use outside the DoD. There's nothing to suggest that, for example, the 853 ZT controls can't be fully utilized in the FedCiv world, second party, Five Eyes, NATO. Anybody implementing zero trust would find that of great interest. And so we think we're doing a service that goes outside and beyond the DoD even.
Well, that is quite a bit of work, and it's exciting that you're taking it on. Thanks for not shying away from the hard problems. Sounds like you guys are addressing them directly. And I really love the approach, threat informed, as you mentioned. DoD CAR connectivity. but then also the agility that you're already thinking about 1.5. You're already thinking about what's next, because zero trust really, yeah, zero trust as a philosophy really is rooted in lessons learned. And so, knowing that it has that connective tissue, just really great approach that you guys are doing here. We really appreciate it. And with your background, there's just so much you bring to the table in revolutionizing this area. We talked a little bit about the connectivity with civilian or with defense industrial base. Are there any additional things that you'd like to say that we haven't already talked about? Any last thoughts you'd like to share?
I'd like to maybe bring up the showstoppers. We have things that are going on right now that we're blessed are happening nicely, as I said earlier, that things are just lining up. But these things need to continue. If we have a 5-year plan for folks that are going to do COA 1, we have to have this momentum, this buy-in, this support, this tremendous support in the DoD, extend for years, 5 years, or at least at this point, 4 more years, and beyond. So we can't let up on what we're doing now. So let me just rattle off some thoughts here that I believe in a year of managing the portfolio office and leading it need to continue at pace. We need to definitely have the DoD's top commitment, including the mil depths, for their need to accelerate the existing infrastructure to zero trust. It's happening. We're doing it, but we have to keep the attention on that because just based on my past of 30-something years in the business, it's easy to have these big projects and programs happen, and then 2+ years later, 3 years later, there's another shiny object. I don't believe this is the case for zero trust. This is so monumentally different. It's not a project that you could just sense has limited runway. This is not that. But I'm just saying that we need to have constant attention and interest applied to this, and we shouldn't be letting off on the accelerator. Funding. We have an excellent relationship with the funding elements in the Pentagon. They have an excellent sensitivity and appreciation of what the services need to accelerate to zero trust. We're not necessarily churning from within in a sense that real pain is happening in order to pay for all this. This is something above and beyond that everybody understands needs to be accelerated. And when we're talking about an acceleration, it's not all about taking from Peter to pay Paul. Sometimes it requires new dollars. And so we've been very innovative in working with the budget folks in the Pentagon and the services to think innovatively, to find the funds to fund zero trust acceleration. And to date, nobody's complaining about lack of funds. And I would like that to continue because I really don't want to fight that fight because it is so exhausting in terms of the cycles and attention needed just to focus on that when there's so many other things that we need to focus on that are equally as challenging. So if we could resolve the funding thing and make sure that the efforts are fully aligned, synchronized, deconflicted, and justified, I think the budget elements in the Pentagon, that's what they want to see. In terms of unknown unknowns, we don't know what speed bumps we may hit in the future. For example, COA 2 might not work. I hope it does. I believe it will. But until we really run through the gamut of testing it and red teaming it and validating it and all of that, and that's not insignificant, it might not work. Assuming it doesn't work, that puts our strategy significantly behind in a sense that now we're only relying on COA 1 and COA 3. COA 3 is working, but it would be a big hit if we couldn't do a COA 2 commercial zero trust. So we're going to have to find a way to make it work. And hoping, Steve, that I could work with you and others in the other CSPs to make that happen. That's how critical it really is. So those are the sorts of things that need to continue, and that requires a lot of nourishing. It requires a lot of leadership. We have tremendous leadership in DoD CIO on this. It's unrelenting in a good way. Again, all of that needs to continue. The leadership for Zero Trust has been fantastic in the DoD, and it's a pleasure to work with the larger team.
Fantastic. Well, look forward to working and collaborating with you as well as the broader industry as we share lessons learned, what works, and Zero Trust has been a learning opportunity for many organizations. Microsoft has been on that path of learning for many years, the department as well. But really, we have to come together as an industry to support the department's success here. So appreciate all the great work that you're doing to achieve these outcomes of Zero Trust within the department, and to do so on an accelerated schedule, and hopefully help a lot of others along the way. So thanks for your time today, Randy. Really appreciate the insights.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invite, and I really appreciate it.